Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and what a fine day we have to celebrate. Spectacular, aren't they? A fine, fine tribute to a place I'm especially proud to call my hometown. Excuse me, I have presumed familiarity, contrary to the manners my good Southern mother tried to instill in me. I am Irvin S. Cobb. Or to be more precise, now that's a condition which I will continually strive for since I'm a trained newspaper reporter. As a matter of fact, I was editor of your fair city's afternoon newspaper, a job upon which I cut my reportorial milk teeth. Oh, but I wonder, as I was saying, to be more accurate, I am the late Irvin S. Cobb. Now please don't be alarmed by my appearance here today. I didn't come here to make anybody uncomfortable. Although that candor I alluded to seems to have made a great many people uncomfortable. Well, it's like I always say, oh, then just a second, I cannot wonder. Today I have been given honorable employment. Today it's my happy task to walk with you through the pages of our fair city's history. Now, when you get on this side of life, going from one decade to another is as easy as strolling through your own home. It's one of the finer things about passing on. Well, for your folks' sake, we will stick to some type of timeline. I've invited several friends here today to share their stories with you. Now, some of them you know, just as I know some of you, and some of them you'll be meeting for the very first time. But, oh, the stories they can tell. Now, those of you that know me know how I love a good story. So without further ado, allow me to introduce to you Amos Wilson. He's a river man. Now, look carefully behind those two horses. He's the man with the hat on.
You rolling river, oh Shenandoah, I love your daughter. Away, we're bound away on the wide Missouri. My, oh my, how this place brings back memories. That's the thing about the water. It never really changes. Not like the ground here, all covered with rock and that wall there. No, sir. The river just keeps rolling and rolling along. You know that song I sung about the river's true. But sometimes I imagine that river as a lady, all smiling, beautiful, and prissy on the surface, never knowing what was going on underneath. Power and strength enough to keep a whole country together. Temper enough to bring a grown man to his knees in tears. Giving life and taking it just as easily. I never quite understood the river, even though I worked on a pertinent all my life. You see this picture here? It was painted in the 1890s. I don't remember the exact year, but you see these two teams of mules here? I was in charge of those boys. It was good mules. Now you see, steamboats would come in and out of Paducah all the time, unloading hogshead barrels of tobacco, I believe it was. Nearly 20,000 barrels of tobacco was brought here each year for nearly 2 or 3 years. We would unload those steamboats of tobacco and load them on wagons and take them into town for storing. It was hard work, but good work. Shoot, any work back then was good if you can get it. I didn't mind though, because I had the river and all the noise of traffic on it. Yes, all kind of boats came in and out of Paducah. Yeah, there was flat boats and rafts and keel boats and of course steamboats. Yes, sir. They'd come in and out, sliding in and out of Paducah, carrying all manner of goods and folk. Well, now you see, I guess you could say Paducah was in a kind of a catbird seat back then, being as how it was close to the Ohio River and the Tennessee. You see, all kind of boats would come in, bringing their cargo, unloading and then reloading, and all manner of folks would get off that boat. And I was careful to watch to see what kind of folks got off here, on account of a story my daddy told me. Now you see, he said when he was a boy, performing folks like to come through here and perform every now and then. He said that there was ventriloquists would get off the boat and sleight of hand artists, and there was one fella that had folks that they looked like all waxified when you touch them. Almost felt like they was real. But the one that got me was a story he told me about a fella, a Mr. Combs, that had a very special kind of art he was carrying. And you never guess what kind it was either. It was skulls. Human skulls. Ooh. Well, I was half hoping and half kind of scared. I didn't see nobody like that got off. But anyway, what I remember most was barrels and barrels and barrels of tobacco. Yes, sir. Listen, can you hear it? Can you hear it? Oh, the river's calling, y'all. Amongst all your modern noises. If you listen real close, you can hear it. You can hear the foreman hollering down the way for the boys to start working. And my muse here, old Buck and Ernie, all hard and spitting. Yes, sir, I loved it, I did. But I tell you what, if you listen real close, you can hear the river telling you about yesterday and giving you a promise for tomorrow. Slowly going in and sometime in a hurry to get out. Yes, sir? Just listen. Just listen.
I simply could not believe it. Me, Sally Lane Stahl, Strawberry Queen. That was 1940, one of the area's bumper crops in strawberries. Just between you, me, and the flood wall, there's simply not a better way to get dates. Why, Jimmy Bradshaw, Tom King, and Richard Stedman were practically fighting over me that night. Since Jimmy had asked first, though, I was obligated. In the back of my mind, I knew that Tom and Rich would be more fun later that summer after Jimmy went away to college. Oh, I'm supposed to be telling you about the Strawberry Festival. Well, Mr. Fred Newman wrote a nice little piece on the whole affair, and here's what he has to say about it. No honor in Western Kentucky is more coveted than that of the Strawberry Queen. Long before the contest opens, girls are mentioned for their lofty post, and once the race is underway, there is spirited rivalry. I'll say, one girl got downright catty about the whole thing. She told another contestant the wrong time, and the poor girl was late for the parade. The parade, can you imagine? Interest mounts as the close draws near, and the final vote counting leaves the section breathless. They think the crowd is breathless. I thought I was going to pass out. Announcement of the winner is heralded far and wide. Felicitations, goodwill, and a busy program follow for both Her Majesty and aides. There is no end to the many honors bestowed upon the lucky girl. She is speeded on every side and crowned in a manner befitting one who symbolizes a product of great pride. Once I found out I was going to be in the contest, things did get awful busy. Lands, it was a busy time. Me and Mama had to go get a new dress. Well, actually, Mama made the dress. We bought a fancy new pattern and some absolutely beautiful material. Red taffeta with embroidery flowers all around the skirt. Mama had quite a time making that dress. That material was something to work with. Then our trip to Paducah. I bought brand new lipstick from Kresge's, satin rouge, and some new hose from Mangles, and some absolutely beautiful shoes from Wall's Slipper Shop. I practiced walking in my house all before the pageant. I was afraid I would wobble. So, the big day comes. Mama had been up all night sewing my dress, and she wasn't even grumpy. You see, she had been Miss Freebridge back in her day in Cape Girardeau, so she knew the importance of all of this. The night before, I slept on pin curls, so I had quite a headache the next day. But when I started to put on my makeup, I forgot all about it. I cannot begin to tell you how exciting that day was for me. People from all over came to Paducah to join in the fun and festivities. There was a street band with some of the best bands, and the Queen's Ball. Oh, it was so much fun. The concessions and prizes, I wish it could have lasted forever. Besides my shoes, there was one more thing I was the slightest bit nervous about. You see, I was afraid I would have to eat a strawberry. Being the Strawberry Queen and all. Between you and me, I've always been allergic to those beautiful little fruits. If I would have ate one, I would have blown up as big as a hot air balloon and turned as red as the berry itself. I guess Mama was the only one who ever really knew that. And now you.
Hello, folks. Name's James. John James. I'm that mug there on the far left, the man with the axe. That man next to me, Ernest Potts. Finest firefighter ever was. Not a bad cook either. He could make biscuits and gravy better than my dear wife, Pamela Ray. Bless her soul, she always got the gravy a tad lumpy and the biscuits a bit burnt. But she was a pretty thing, though. A feast for the eyes. Now, Ernest, he was some kind of cook. Like I said, fine fireman. I'll get to that. First, let me tell you about our setup. Long about the time this picture was taken, about 1910, we were operating out of station number 5 at 17th and Broadway. I understand you folks have a fancy two-bay structure there now, but in my day, we worked with horses and wagons. While behind Ernest and me, you can see one of our steam pumpers. The city had 9 pieces of horse-drawn firefighting equipment, including that ladder hose wagon and steam pumper. We had 17 horses, so you can imagine what our budget was like. While the horseshoeing, blacksmith, and bill alone came to almost $800, I happen to know that figure because my brother-in-law, Mr. Harry G. Balmore, he was the accountant what kept the books for the blacksmith and the feed supplier. Now, Harry was a lot like his sister, my wife, Pamela Ray. They both loved to talk. He told me that the feed bill alone came to almost $2,300. Can you imagine spending that kind of money on horse food? Well, it had to be done, at least till motors came along and replaced horses like they eventually did. By 1916, in fact, we were completely motorized. They started spending that feed money on petrol. Everything eats something. Which takes me back to Ernest. Me and Ernest, we joined the department in 1902. The department was 20 years old that year, same age as we were. Oh, the city had firemen before that time, but never paid them till 1882. When everyone completely realized that the good-hearted volunteers simply weren't going to be able to cut the mustard anymore. Not with the way the city was growing and expanding, and especially after that horrible incident in 1854, when whole blocks were burned to the ground. So, anyway, me and Ernest, we joined up, ready to be heroes if need be. I never will forget our first call. The horses were hauling gravel, so our stable boy, Gordon, he rushes the horses back to the station. We hitch them up to the wagons. I look over at Ernest, who's just finishing up his noon meal. He starts to get that look in his eye. Now, Ernest was the type that could get excited if things started to happen. Like I said, he started to get that look in his eye, and that left cheek started to twitching. He started stammering something akin to, "Whoa, Nellie, whoa, Nellie, whoa, Nellie." But now, don't get me wrong, Ernest was no fool, nor was he a panicker. Looking back, I believe these were habits that he had acquired during childhood that he sort of carried along with him like a comforting blanket as he got older. So we piled onto the wagons. We head off down Broadway toward 12th Street, where a cook's fire had gotten out of control. It seemed the cook had been frying bacon and had gotten popped by the hot grease. Well, when that grease hit her, she let out a whoop, which caused the little girl helping her to jump back into the wall, causing a broom to strike the skillet that was frying the bacon, flipping it up into the air, grease going everywhere. Well, the cook story tended to break down a bit at this point, but never mind that, it was blazing. Ernest and me, we followed right in behind the more experienced firemen, and really, within a matter of minutes, the whole fire was finished. It's funny now, but at the time, it was a rather serious matter. For you see, the cook was a rather large woman, rather amply supplied. Now, ladies, don't get upset, don't take offense. This is just too good not to share. Like I said, this rather large woman with her very ample supply, it seems that that very ample supply had been her first defense against flames. While her chest was actually smoking where it had been singed. Well, I looked over at old Ernest to see if he was seeing what I was seeing. He was seeing it because he was grinning from ear to ear like a schoolboy. Then I started laughing at old Ernest, because right between his two front teeth was a string of turnip greens. Like I said, he'd been finishing his lunch when we got the call. I guess in the excitement, he forgot all about that wad of turnip greens. Ooh-wee! What a day, what a day. To this day, I don't eat turnip greens without thinking of old Ernest. And for that matter, frying bacon can bring a smile to my face, too.
It was another miserable winter day. I told my wife, Bobby, I just didn't know how I was going to stand one more day of rain. You know, I remember her nodding and saying something to the effect that, well, at least Paducah's always been high and dry. Yeah, and she had a point. It was a fact that while other towns and cities along the Ohio and Tennessee flooded, Paducah had remained largely untouched. After all, we'd made it through 1902, 1913. We'd survived 1937, we figured. Around the 10th of January, though, we were hit with the worst sleet storm Paducah had ever experienced. All the telephone, telegraph, electric light wires completely wrecked. And as Bobby said, what was worse was the damage done to the beautiful trees. Lands, I thought my bride was going to cry every time she looked at what was left of that old redbud out our back window. Well, so it took us several days to get past that sleet storm, repair all the damage. But you know, once we had, everybody just naturally thought the worst was over. Actually, the flood was just beginning. On January 21st, I went out on a call, and by the time I returned, the water was about 2 feet deep at 19th and Broadway, just 2 blocks from our house at 110 Fountain Avenue. The next day brought more sleet. Backwaters rapidly rose, covering Kentucky, Broadway, Jefferson, and Monroe streets from 10th clean through 13th. To make matters worse, temperature fell as fast as the water rose. Automobile engines began to freeze up and stall out before they could be recovered. Floodwater had overtaken them. Now that was more than just an inconvenience. That proved to be quite a hazard for the boats, I can tell you. From personal experience, I almost capsized on one run when my boat nicked into the side of an old Ford truck that had been trapped by the rising water. You may rest assured I slowed down a good bit after that little episode. But you know, now that I think about it, I don't believe I ever told Bobby about that. Listen, I'd appreciate you keeping that little piece of information under your hat. She worries about me to this day. Well, by this time we realized the whole city was going to have to move out to the West End. A couple of my patients wouldn't budge, simply camped out in their attics. They lived on sardines and crackers. Occasionally I'd try to bring them some cheese. Couldn't convince them to move, although I suppose I didn't try all that hard. What could I do? I had my hands full without trying to talk sense into stone walls. You know, I discovered that people do, well, strange things during times like that flood. Well, for instance, this one old fella who had pulled out and moved his entire family with him went all the way back downtown in that mess to try to rescue his dog. Now, I didn't see it, mind you, but evidently that little bulldog made his way onto a rooftop and was yipping like a pig in a poke. Oh, but there was one that was even better than that. Now, I can't begin to imagine how in the world this one happened. But it seems that down by the river, down around the market area somewheres, I suppose, a cow found its way to dry ground onto the second floor porch of another building. Now, can you just picture it? A dog a-yapping on one, a cow a-mooing on another. Oh, my. Well, I suppose even in the bleakest of situations, you can find something to laugh over. And again, maybe it's in the bleakest of situations you have to find something to laugh over. What do you think? Where was I now? Oh, yes. Well, eventually we set up a medical station at Clark School. Now, I still made house calls, mind you. It was something else. I would roll up to a pretty brick home, open the front door, then roll on into the living room, or front hall, tie the boat off to the banister of the staircase, and then step over the banister onto the second floor to minister to the patient. On and on it went. Finally, even though the Red Cross, much to their credit I might add, had things pretty well organized, we all got together and decided the entire city must be evacuated. There were simply too many hazards. Riverside Hospital was the first to be evacuated, then the hotels. Illinois Central Hospital was the last to be moved. The dead we simply moved onto the second floors of the various funeral homes. We intended no disrespect, you understand. It's just that we had the living to be concerned with. In just 10 days, 22,000 people registered as refugees at Arcadia School. 22,000! And conditions were bad. I was afraid there was going to be a typhoid epidemic because folks were jammed like sardines into those churches and schools. Fortunately, the other health officials agreed with me. We conducted a mass inoculation. That seemed to do it. No major outbreak occurred. I only heard tell of one case of diphtheria. Dr. Leon Higdon, who was delivering babies in his own home, diagnosed that one case, administered an antitoxin to the mother and newborn, and finally managed to get them to the Mayfield Hospital, I believe it was, by car and, well, boat. As far as I know, mother and child survived just fine. Well, it was long about the middle of February that the worst was over. I still have the Paducah Sun-Democrat from February 18th. Headline reads, "River's long reign at end." Damage was estimated at over $26 million. Mercy, Bobby and I didn't know how our city would ever recover. But look now, it did. You did. You always will, I expect. That's just how Paducans are. Oh, and by the way, just between us, this here wall, that's not a half bad idea either.
Have you ever had your life completely turned upside down and inside out? You can be going along, minding your own business, and all of a sudden something happens and boom, you're headed off in a totally different direction. My name's Irene Worth, and this picture was made in 1940. At the time, I was working as a clerk at a lovely ladies' garment shop down around the 4th block. You might remember it. It was Lowenthal's Ladies' Clothing Store. Now, Paducah was one of the finest places to shop, and it had a reputation of being a very upscale apparel hub. We had lovely ladies' clothing stores and shoe stores and jewelry stores and even men's clothing stores. Now, when you came to Paducah, you had to dress up if you were going to the big city. I used to love to watch the ladies file in and out throughout the day and try on this and that. Now, Barrett and I were engaged to be married at the time, and we used to go after work every night to see whatever show was playing down at the arcade or the Columbia. Well, I loved to watch Marlena Dietrich, Bing Crosby, Bob Hope, Greta Garbo, and oh, my very favorite was Ginger Rogers. After the show, we'd window shop sometimes, and sometimes we'd go to get a bite to eat. Now, on special days, Barrett would take me to Boswell's at the Palmers, or sometimes down to Sorrento's down at the Columbian. Sometimes I'd just like to go to Woolworth's and have a Coca-Cola and a grilled cheese sandwich. And other days I'd have a piece of coconut cream pie and a cup of coffee. Now in those days I didn't have to worry about a thing because I never gained a lick. I was married in 1941 and it was clear by the time that Europe was serious about the war. Now as a young bride I prayed and prayed that the U.S. wouldn't get any more involved than they had. But by December it was clear that the U.S. was going to war. Now Barrett had enlisted, and at the time he was being sent to Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri, and then on to California, and from there he was going to be sent overseas. I had planned to go out and join him at the time, but Father Worth had his heart attack and plans just fell through. I was still working at Lowenthal's, and Barrett's mother Ima came in one day and asked me if I'd like to come work at the towing company. A towing company. Now I ask you, do I look like someone who would work at a towing company? I was used to working at a ladies' clothing store where the women wore lovely gloves and the smell of perfume floated through the air. And she was asking me to come and work at a towing company where the only gloves that I ever saw were oil-stained and the only smell I ever smelled was fish. Well, she had her way, and before long I said yes, and I started keeping the books. Turned out I had quite a head for numbers. Pretty soon I was keeping Mother and Father Worth's personal accounts and the towing company. Barrett came home and we started our family, and I still continued to keep those books. No, sir, let me tell you something. Ladies' clothing stores are wonderful, but there's nothing like controlling a checkbook. Nothing like it at all.
My, that Irene. I bet she gave old Barrett a run for his money. That woman could be mayor of Paducah someday. Now, Paducah's always had a tradition of turning out strong-willed women. Women that get the job done. Still do. Still do. Well, that's about it for today, folks. Now, don't get me wrong. There are still plenty of stories to tell. Plenty of stories. Well, if we had time, we could get into stories about that little whippersnapper, Ralph Jordan. He was a messenger for the Sun Democrat. Got all over town, heard things he shouldn't hear, saw things he shouldn't see. He knew all the news there was to tell in Paducah. I'm not sure that it was all fit to print. Well, anyway, there's going to still be more and more stories, and we're going to be here to tell them. We'll be back. You'll be back too. Good day.